Welcome back to G-Town Math with Mr. Smith. I want to give you guys a lesson recap of what we went over today in class. And it was all about representing division in different ways. So today we had our lesson goal as representing division using three specific different methods. So we represented division using diagrams, we represented division using equations, and we also represented division using story problems. So I want to give you guys an example of how you can represent division using diagrams. And to do that, I gave you guys a problem that's really similar to something you might see in your homework tonight. So the directions read, draw a diagram to represent the problem, then solve. And remember, a diagram is really just a fancy math term for picture. And drawing diagrams and drawing pictures is an awesome strategy for helping us really understand what's going on in a problem. The better we understand what's going on in a problem, especially a story problem, the more successful we'll be in solving that problem. So let's take a look at the problem I have here. And it says, Mr. Smith has 4 muffins. He cuts each muffin into thirds. How many 1/3 muffin pieces does he have? So, to start out, I'm going to draw a diagram that represents 4 muffins being cut into thirds. So I'm going to start out and I'm going to draw 4 rectangles. And if you want to draw a picture that looks a little closer to muffins, you can do that as well. But just to make things nice and easy, I'm going to draw these 4 rectangles here, and that represents my 4 muffins. And I need to cut these muffins into thirds. So I'm going to draw my lines through each of these muffins, and I want to do so that I have 3 pieces per muffin. So that I have each muffin divided into thirds. And so now that I've done that, I can solve the story problem here pretty easily. So I can figure out how many 1/3 muffin pieces I have simply by counting up the number of thirds I have in my diagram. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12 1/3 pieces of muffin. And so that's awesome. So we've solved the problem. But I want to focus our attention to what our lesson goal was today, and that is representing division using different methods. So I'm just going to erase my answer down here, and I want to draw our attention to really what division problem is being represented by this diagram. And so we can look at this diagram, and I can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 muffins being divided into thirds. So really what I have here is I have the division problem 4 divided by 1/3 represented by this diagram here. All right, and the next way we learned how we can represent division is by using equations. And I just want to remind you guys that whenever we're talking about equations, pay special attention to this equa part of equations, because that's going to remind you that equations always have an equal sign. So we can use an equation to represent a division problem. So let's take a look at the example here. The directions say write, and that should be an equation. My apologies, guys. Write an equation to represent the problem, then solve. Okay, so Lewis has a piece of string that is 6 feet long. He cuts the string into pieces that are each 1/5 feet long, or 1/5 of a foot long. How many pieces does he cut? So we can actually pull an equation out of this story problem here and represent the division that's taking place here using an equation. So in order to do that, I need to think about, okay, what is my dividend going to be? Or what number is going to be divided by another number? And I think we can all see that I'm going to be dividing or cutting, or I should say Lewis is going to be dividing or cutting this piece of string that is 6 feet long. So my dividend is going to be 6. And then since I'm going to be cutting this string, or again, Lewis is going to be cutting this string into 1/5 foot long pieces, then I'm going to take 6 and divide that by 1/5. And if we want to go ahead and then solve this problem, remember that in order to solve a division problem with fractions, we're going to use multiplication. And the reason we can do that is because multiplication is an inverse operation of division. So I have 6 divided by 1/5, and I'm going to go ahead and change my 6 here into a fraction. Remember, with whole numbers, you only have to do one thing to change or write the whole number as a fraction. Just one thing, and that is to write a 1 underneath the whole number. So I have 6 over 1 divided by 1/5. Alright, so it turns out that I'm not going to do anything special to this 6 over 1. I'm just going to keep 6 over 1 as it is. But I am going to change this division sign. I'm going to change this division sign into its inverse operation, the multiplication sign. And then I'm going to flip-flop my 1/5 here. So I'm going to write the reciprocal, or the opposite of 1/5 here. And all I do is flip 1/5 into 5 over 1. And now I have a nice and simple multiplication problem. I have 6 over 1 times 5 over 1. I'm going to multiply my numerators straight across. 6 times 5 is going to give me 30. 1 times 1, of course, is 1. And so we end up with an answer. We're going to have 30 over 1 pieces of string that Lewis is going to cut here. And 30 over 1, we can really just write this as 30. So he's going to have 30 pieces of string. And the last way we represented division today was using a story problem. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting ways to represent a division problem, because it really gets us thinking about what division is really all about. And we really have to understand what's going on in the problem to be able to write a story problem. So the directions here say write a story problem to represent 1/3 divided by 4. And so our dividend then is 1/3. So we need to figure out, okay, what is 1/3 going to represent in our problem? And whenever I see fractions, I can't help but think of pizza or pies. So I'm just going to stick with the classic example of pizza. And so I'm going to say that the 1/3 represents 1/3 of a pizza. And I'll draw my pizza here. And let's see here. It's not the best drawing, I'll admit, but I'm going to color in this third here. And so the 1/3, the dividend in our problem is going to be 1/3 of a piece of pizza, or 1/3 of a whole pizza, I should say. And so the dividend's 1/3. We say that's going to represent 1/3 of a pizza. But what about the divisor here? We have 1/3 divided by 4. Our divisor is 4. Well, how about we say 4 friends? So the 4 is going to represent 4 friends. And so now that we know what our dividend 1/3 is going to represent in our story problem, and we know what the 4 is going to represent our divisor in the story problem, now we can actually make this story problem a reality. So I'm going to start out with my dividend, and as you remember, we said the 1/3 is representing 1/3 of a pizza. So let's say Jill has 1/3 of a pizza. And let's say she shares that 1/3 of a pizza with 4 of her friends. With 4 of her friends. Well, my question here, the real question is, if we're going to be dividing 1/3 of this pizza amongst 4 friends, how much pizza will each friend get? I'm going to squeeze the get right at the bottom of the page there. But you can see we were able to pretty quickly and easily come up with a story problem. So the first thing you need to think about when you see a problem like this, where it's asking you to write a story problem to represent a division problem, is you need to look at the dividend and say, okay, what's the dividend going to represent my problem? Or what is my dividend going to be? Is it going to be a pizza? Is it going to be a pie? And then you need to look at the divisor and figure out, okay, what's my divisor going to be in my problem? Is it going to be 4 friends? Is it going to be 4 students? Is it going to be 4 cats? I don't recommend sharing pizza with cats, but you can create your own story problem as long as it accurately represents the division problem given in the problem. Alright, so last but not least, I want to give you guys an opportunity to try a problem on your own. And again, all of the problems that we've gone over, all the examples, including this problem right here, are very similar to problems that you see on your homework assignment. So the problem, or the directions to the problem state, draw a diagram to represent the problem and solve. So the problem is 2 students share 1/3 of a liter of soda equally. What fraction of the liter of soda does each student get? Okay, and this can be a little tricky to think about sometimes, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to draw one large rectangle here. And this rectangle is going to represent a whole liter. This is going to be 1 liter of soda. Well, the 2 students are actually sharing 1/3 of this liter of soda equally. So what I can do is I can actually cut or divide my 1/3, or I'm sorry, my 1 liter of soda into thirds. So now I have 1, 2, 3 sections here, or 3/3 of a liter here. And so, but what I'm really interested in is we're going to be sharing each of these 1/3 of a liter amongst 2 students. So I can divide each third here in half. And so I can actually look and see that now, instead of having 3/3 in this liter, I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sixths in this liter. So I can go ahead and I can take a look here at one of these thirds, and if I'm one of the students here that's going to get some of this soda, I'm going to shade in half, and it turns out that what I've shaded in here is 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of this liter here. So I actually have 1/6 of a liter. And so the answer here, what fraction of the liter of soda does each student get, is actually 1/6 of a liter. And I can show you using an equation that 1/6 of a liter is, in fact, the correct answer. So if I have 1/3 of a liter of soda, and we're going to divide that equally amongst 2 students, I have a division problem here. I have 1/3 divided by 2, and I know that when I'm dividing fractions, I'm going to keep my first fraction here the same. I'm not going to change the 1/3 here, so I'm just going to write 1/3. And of course, to solve a fraction division problem, we're going to use multiplication. So I'm going to change this division sign into a multiplication sign. And then I'm going to flip my 2. And remember that when we have a whole number, you only have to do one thing, right? You have to do one thing to change it into a fraction. And you write a 1 underneath the whole number. So if you're going to flip 2 over 1, that's going to be 1 over 2, or 1/2. And now we can multiply, and I simply multiply across the top here. 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 2 is 6, and lo and behold, 1/6 is the same answer as we got when we drew the diagram. Now, the point of all this is, and the point of the lesson today was, you can use different methods to represent division. You can use equations like we did right here. We can use diagrams or pictures, or we can even use story problems to represent division. So I hope this video made your homework a little bit easier, made a little more sense out of the lesson today, and I encourage you guys to represent division in any way that you feel comfortable doing. Some of you might prefer to represent division using equations, others might like to use pictures, and some of you guys who like to write may like to create story problems. The point is, you can use different ways to represent division, and it all helps you really understand what division is all about. So until next time, I'll see you guys in math class.